Hello there friends, last year at E3, Nintendo's big show closing announcement was the announcement of a direct sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild 2, if you will. I highly doubt it will just be called Breath of the Wild 2, it will be called something else, but for now, Breath of the Wild 2. But for now, in lieu of information about that game, we have not gotten anything since that initial reveal trailer. I figured I'd talk about what I wanted from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. And it's not like I'm like, these are the things I want them to fix. These are the things that I think were wrong with the original game, because I think the original game is a bit of a masterpiece. These are more the things I'm like, how do you make the next version of that game different? How do you make it a different experience and like substantively different from the original game? And how do you adjust that original game, I think, to a degree, to tell a different story? Because telling a story with a game that open is actually pretty difficult, as illustrated by the fact that they basically had to bend over backwards to incorporate some kind of prolonged narrative into that original game. I remember Aonuma was like, I've come up with a trick to tell a story across a game so open, and his trick was you just stumble across a bunch of memories that are told out of sequence. Which worked, I think, for the most part, but it's like, it's not magical there, Mr. Aonuma. Come on. So I'm going to go through 5 things I want from the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Some of these things are more of the same in a way. Some of these things are quite different. Some of these things are more modest tweaks from the original Breath of the Wild as opposed to like revolutionarily something different. Because realistically, when you're making a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, unless they go like full Majora's Mask and make something really weird, they're probably going to make a relatively similar experience, content-wise anyway, but we'll see. Number 1, and now kind of bear with me with this one, a different kind of open world. I want this game to be a different kind of open. Because when I say that, I'm thinking of the Great Plateau, which I think in many ways should be the template for the game as a whole. Not that the rest of the game wasn't good, not that when you left the Great Plateau, the game like plateaued, if you will, pardon the pun. I think that area is kind of the template for, I think, how all open world games should be, as opposed to just drop you in an open map, say go anywhere, because you can do that, and it really did work in the original game, but I'm not sure can you do that twice, and particularly I'm not sure you can tell a story while doing that. So if they want to make a more story focused game, if they want to kind of tweak the format of Breath of the Wild a little, I would be very much on board with a bunch of smaller, denser areas to explore that you unlock by getting new items. Say a hookshot lets you get up to a higher place, and then there's a whole new Great Plateau sized area for you to explore. Because I kind of love that original area. I kind of love that original, like, the Great Plateau is huge, but not so huge that you couldn't like map it in your mind. There's tons of interesting things. There's different areas, the snow area, and there's the Talos area over to the right, and then you have the ruins on the left, and you have the Temple of Time. And I think the rest of the game wasn't quite as dense in terms of actually offering you interesting things to find. Not quite. So I'm petitioning for a series of sandboxes as opposed to one large world. And that will allow them to tell a story, that will allow them to be a little more linear about it while leaving a great deal of openness. So yes, a different kind of open. Not fully open world, but don't go all the way back to like Skyward Sword where you have one single more enclosed area that you have to explore a couple times. Number 2, and this may be one of my more controversial ones, similar dungeons. Now I know, everybody that's talked about Breath of the Wild has talked about the fact that they didn't love the dungeons, and that they didn't love the fact that the dungeons weren't the same as old Zelda dungeons. And I kind of disagree. I liked the dungeons in Breath of the Wild. I thought the fact that they were puzzle-based and not like the lock and key item puzzle-based that you got in old Zelda games, a formula which I think has aged a little badly, particularly when I was playing Link's Awakening last year. It was just like, all of these dungeons amount to wander around until you find a key. And that's not a puzzle, it's not particularly great. And the Breath of the Wild puzzles were so much better. They were like, you have to think about the things you have at your disposal and use them in a smart way and put these pieces together in a way that actually solves the puzzle, instead of just keep on wandering around, checking your map, finding a key. I really soured on that old school Zelda dungeon design. It was fine for what it was at the time, but they made better dungeons, especially in like the Link Between Worlds and in Breath of the Wild. I don't really want the old school dungeon formula back. I just don't think it's particularly interesting. Oh, you find one item and then all the puzzles are based around that item and they're relatively straightforward. And oh, you see that, well, when you go back through, you can use the item you found in the dungeon. It's like, yeah, give me all the items and then put those items together to create more interesting puzzles. And like, I'm perfectly fine with loads of shrines because that creates an incentive to explore. I'm perfectly fine with more dungeons because there were only 4. If there was 8 of them, all of them differently designed, because I will agree on the point that it was a little disappointing that while I understand from a thematic level why all of the divine beasts looked relatively similar on the inside, it wasn't particularly interesting from an aesthetic level. So yes, I'm on board with overhauling how those dungeons look. I'm on board with adding more of them, but I don't think I'm on board with changing the design philosophy behind them. So yes, similar dungeons, just change the aesthetic. Number 3, side quests. Make them better. Because there were a handful of really great side quests in Breath of the Wild. Like the Tarrytown side quest is among my favourite side quests in all of video games. The kind of overall Kakariko Village side quest, really, really good. And then most of the rest of them in the game are just go here, get some apples, bring me back the apples. So I would be on board with there only being like 10 to 15 really good side quests in the game, but they have to be really good side quests. Like maybe not quite Tarrytown level, because that side quest is so good, but like similar in scope and ambition, and then the rest is just and they can be multi-stage and multi-layer and you have to go all over the map. I'm fine with all that, but I really don't want those just like fetch quest side quests that are just like, go get a horse, bring me back the horse. Oh wonderful, you got me the horse, here's some rupees. And then I'm like, ugh, you know, it's filler. It does. I have a bunch of side quests in the game. I've played the game for 100 hours, gotten all the shrines. Koroks, I'm on board with Koroks because they're fun. They're little puzzles hidden throughout the world. You're never really intended to find all of them unless you're a psychopath, and you bothered to find all of them, which I kind of admire, and then they give you a golden turd, which is always nice. But like there are secrets and stuff to find and fun stuff like that, but for the most part a lot of those side quests are filler. Take them out. They don't need to be there. Just put the good stuff in, and trust people will want to explore without you needing to go find me some fruits, and then cook me a meal and bring me back the meal. And then like, ugh. So you have more Tarrytown, less fetch quests. It's what I want from side quests. Number 4, based on the trailer, the cinematic they've revealed so far, it looks like they're going down a more dark road. Hyrule Castle is shot into space, there's an evil zombie underneath Hyrule Castle that looks kind of like Ganon. What's all that about? Who knows? And the entire tone is kind of creepy and sinister, which is pretty cool. But I will say, I want them to go more down the line of kind of charming dark than dark, or dark for the sake of dark. You know, a bit of charm, a bit of sense of humor, a bit of fun, as opposed to just like, bah, everything is bad, Ganon is evil, look at him being scary. Less of that, because more Majora's Mask, less Twilight Princess is what I'm saying. I think Twilight Princess is a good game, but not a great game. And it's a good, enjoyable, fun time, but the darkness feels forced. It's like, oh, we're brooding and you're a wolf. The wolf is cute. But other than that, I don't want broody dark, I don't want angsty dark, I don't want moody dark. I want like charming, fun dark, playful dark, weird dark, like Majora's Mask. Basically I want Majora's Mask's tone, because the tone is what separates Zelda games usually. Most of the games in the series don't have that Breath of the Wild style jump in gameplay, and this probably won't either. This will probably be relatively similar to what came before it on a gameplay perspective. If I was to guess, it's being built on the same engine, so it's going to be a relatively similar game. Change the tone, a different kind of dark. But I'm excited for it to go dark. That's at least extremely different from the original Breath of the Wild, which it was a story about despair and loss, but it was never really a dark story about despair and loss. And last, but certainly not least, the 5th thing I want from Breath of the Wild: breakable weapons. Now, I hear you saying, but Garrett, that was in the first game. Why do you want something that was already in the game? Because one of the most criticized things in Breath of the Wild was the breakable weapons. And I think everybody that gave out about them were wrong. So much of what Breath of the Wild did hinged on your weapons breaking. You need less weapons so the incentive to explore and find weapons feels meaningful. Combat, if you just had the Master Sword, it would suck. You could just hit the Lionel over and over again until it died, which you can kind of do anyway, but you have to be smart about it, and your weapon will break, so you'll probably have to adapt during that fight. And that's the whole hinge of the combat. If your weapon breaks, you adapt, you switch to another weapon, you switch to a bow, you use your runes. So yeah, I want them to keep the breakable weapons. I think they're integral to the design. I think they make the game better. They can get rid of the rain. I'm fine with that. You know, it's kind of funny the first like 2 times, but then when you climb a cliff and it's raining and you have to wait for it to stop raining, that just becomes annoying. Breakable weapons enhances the design. Rain kind of hindered it. So leave them in. I want my sword shattering when I hit something in the face with it. It's actually kind of satisfying, and then you can throw it for extra damage. It's cool. So those are 5 things I want from Breath of the Wild 2. I'm very excited for the game because, well, Breath of the Wild is a masterpiece, and they're making another one, basically. What do you want? Do you want Zelda as a playable character, which would be cool, or more different ruins, which would be also cool, or taking out some of the ruins and replacing them, which I guess would be different. Like, not all those runes were particularly essential. Like the 2 different kinds of bombs, you don't need 2 different kinds of bombs. But what else? What do you want? Tell me what you want from Breath of the Wild 2, or whatever they happen to call it. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on Twitter at GarrettKidney, GAORTTKNY. You can leave a like or a comment or subscribe if you want to be my friend. On your left, my original review of Breath of the Wild from 3 years ago now, and on your right, my games of the decade. Thanks for watching.